We're talking a lot of high school recruiting, and high school recruiting, I still believe, is the bedrock of building a quality program. Like you can fill some of your needs with some of these weak link positions, and you can bolster your team and maybe make a run at something with some of like the positions where a stud can make a difference. But man, it is hard to consistently live out of the portal. For every portal success story, team wise, I can point to you three or four that are pretty disappointed in what they got out of the portal this year. So like high school is still really important. But if you're working in the back office, like man, a lot of your focus in about a week here when the portal officially opens, because right now all we have going in is grad transfers, I believe. Once the undergrad window opens on December 4th, I believe it is, dude, a lot of the focus is going to shift. And I'm curious, like if you were a high school recruit right now, are you jumping on any offer that you think is still valid, or are you still going to play the waiting game?
Well, I think it depends on what position you play.
Sure.
If you're an offensive tackle or a pass rusher, I mean, there's a select few, man, that I tell kids this every cycle, like if you wait it out, you're going to have options you had no idea were options, because you are a body at a position that everyone wants. And it, so yeah, I think if I'm a kid, I'm jumping on whatever spot I can right now. And I'm not talking about, hey, the top 247 guys in the country. Um, but I think schools are as open as ever to adding transfers from a lower level. And I think we could be getting close into not like a farm system, but just that upward trajectory. And yes, you're right. Only graduate transfers can officially be in the portal right now. But you talk to college staffs. I had some school tell me, "Hey, we need to get a little more Ivy League in this locker room." It's like, what? You want Ivy League players? And yeah, man, they're guys that come in. They are going to go to class. They're going to go to the weight room. They're going to have a good GPA, and they're not going to be out of position when we need them to. They're going to be able to learn the playbook in the spring. Um, so it's just fascinating to see how it has really changed. I absolutely agree with you. You can't just focus on the transfer portal. Look at the SEC championship game this weekend. Georgia's going to start C.J. Allen. I think he was our number 4 linebacker in the 2023 cycle as a true freshman. And he started 3 straight games. And I think he's been 2-time newcomer of the week in the SEC. You got to get, like, the best of the best are still recruiting the high school ranks. And yeah, C.J. Allen's out there maybe because of injury. But at Alabama, you have Caleb Downs, our number 1 safety, has been a regular for the Crimson Tide in the back end. And then you have Caden Proctor starting at the tackle position, another true freshman, our number 1 ranked offensive tackle. So I agree with you. Like, you have to continue to recruit the high school ranks. Now, I do think you can kind of catch lightning in a pan with some transfers. You look at Florida State, but once you start winning those games and you elevate your profile, you need to use that to recruit high school talent. And I was watching that Florida State game Saturday night, and it's like, okay, Patrick Payton, 2 sacks for Florida State. Like, that is a big deal. That is a guy who was a late riser down in Miami-Dade County. Miami didn't want him. Florida State wanted him. And, now he's making an impact opposite of Jared Verse. Like, I don't think you can build your whole team on transfers. You can certainly fill some holes, but at the end of the day, it's still important to build through what I call the NFL draft, which is high school recruiting. Yes, free agency is fine, but how many teams are playing for a Super Bowl because they've got a bunch of free agents? They got some guys that were 5th, 6th, 7th round picks playing key roles.
Totally right. And at some positions too, not only is it hard to win the transfer recruiting battles, in some cases the player is just not available like throughout the entire country. Look at Ohio State. Like they needed to take multiple transfer offensive linemen this year. Michigan did too. And like, I don't think the guys they took are necessarily amazing players. Like offensive tackle, real impact defensive linemen are not as plentiful as we would think that they are. I mean, you mentioned Jared Verse, like certainly, but there's a lot of guys out there who probably have not made quite that impact. Quarterback too. Like, we talk about all these transfer quarterbacks. Who's been a really good transfer quarterback in the 23 class? 22 is pretty good, but like, even some of those guys were never on the market. Like Caleb Williams was not on the market. I think it was pretty well understood that when Riley left Oklahoma to go to USC, that's where Williams was going to follow. So as far as guys who are truly, let's call them gettable, like not a lot of real difference makers at quarterback even at times. So I do think that your real high upside players largely continue to come from high school, at least from, my initial look at it. But man, you can get a lot of depth, and you're mentioning like the Ivy League stuff. You can get a lot of really high floor players out there who played a lot of football. And as a coach, you're going to sleep better at night. Like, all right, this guy can start for us. Is he going to be a difference maker? No. Is he going to get me fired? Also, no. Right. And that's a pretty important part, right?
Yeah. I just think more schools are figuring out, all right, we can mine the FCS ranks a little bit. We can look to get other guys because we've seen him in this season. Look at Missouri's running back, D2 transfer, name slipping the top of my mind right now, but he's had a ton of success there in the SEC.
Cody Schrader, yeah.
So I think, so I think schools are as open to that as ever. I also think, what's going on right now is there's so many names in the transfer portal. These personnel departments, they're not even watching who is going into the portal. It's just like, hey, we got to get this kid in on a visit because he, PFF said he played 500 snaps. And I think that is going to lead to roster mismanagement. There's such a rush to get these veteran guys in there, and then sometimes they're just not a fit. And it's just an ever-ending cycle in terms of like, all right, this guy came from a Power 5. In theory, he should be able to play. And just like with any level of football scouting and evaluating, like you're gonna miss. And I think that's dangerous right now. I mean, because I know staffs all around the country that are, hey, who's going to enter the portal? We got to enter the portal, and at the same time, they're trying to play defense with their roster. It's just it's. I don't think the common fan understands how crazy it is right now. It's insane.
And it's really just a product of the calendar being messed up. Like we should have different windows for this, and I think you can have different windows for this without restricting player freedom or putting rules that are just going to get you like instantly sued. Honestly, like this is kind of fixable.
And I think the other thing is throw in the NIL aspect, right? They got to put some guidelines in there. And I'm all for like players making money on their name, image, and likeness. But what's happening right now is you have players on teams that are walking into coaching offices that are saying, hey, if I enter the portal, this team's going to pay me X amount of dollars. Okay. And the sitting head coach is going to be like, well, time out. Let me see if I can get that imaginary figure. Then they get that figure, and the players I heard a story about a player who's like, all right, well, I'm still transferring. That player walked down in the locker room and told everyone, hey, they got $40,000 available. Go get it. Like there needs to be some type of on the books, transaction, or the bubble's eventually going to burst because the funding's all over the place.
I think, clearly the NCAA screwed around and messed this up pretty hard because they just drug their feet forever. Like they had an opportunity to be proactive and they procrastinated, and now it's just, sort of too little too late. I have a feeling the courts are going to handle it for them, and eventually we're just going to be revenue sharing more on the books, guys locked into legitimate contracts type thing, that it's more of a known payroll system. And honestly, if we do go that, we're not that far off from like a salary cap type thing either. So could give a lot of hope to some teams that never win anything, who knows? We shall see.